Psychedelics are increasingly recognized for their potential to help heal trauma, but emerging evidence also shows that when trauma resurfaces during a psychedelic experience, the same mechanisms that enable healing could also lead to destabilization or re-traumatization if it's not in the proper therapeutic container. So, should all psychedelic therapy be trauma informed, and what specific tools should clinicians use to address trauma? I'm Dr. Elena Koning, and this is the integration session where we explore the science, stories, and future of psychedelics. Today's guest is Guy Simon, a clinical social worker, psychotherapist, and PhD candidate whose recent work touches on both the protective and the destabilizing effects of psychedelics in several trauma contexts, including childhood abuse and mass violence events. Let's get into it. Hello, Guy. Welcome to the integration session. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. And I just did an integration session today, so what a coincidence.
Okay, it's very timely then. So I want to dive into a bit about you and your interest in trauma and the relevance to psychedelic therapy. So where did that interest come from, and where are you at currently in the space? Are you a therapist? Are you doing research? How are you involved in
Yeah,
psychedelic science at the moment?
yeah. So my initial interest in trauma, I think, came from my master's, from my first master's. I hold two masters. One is in arts therapy, and the other one is in clinical social work. So my profession is a clinical social worker and a psychotherapist. And when I do psychotherapy, I'm doing psychoanalysis, dynamic psychotherapy, CBT, ACT, and third wave psychology. And trauma was very relevant to my early work in research, which was sexual abuse in early childhood. This is what I did in my master. This is my thesis, and for several years I worked as a laboratory manager at a university, and it was a laboratory for sexual abuse in early childhood. So most of the academic data I chewed during the first years of my career were the development of complex PTSD and PTSD after early childhood abuse. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
And why
And
is that?
psychedelics, right?
Why is that relevant to psychedelics? Tell me.
Well, I didn't know it's relevant until I entered the psychedelics field. So my relationship with psychedelics are recreational. You know, I used to be a teenager. Psychedelics were very present in my teenhood, and after that, I became a therapist, and I continue doing my fun activities, but on my, my own time. When I reached this part of my life that I wanted to do a very fundamental research, doing a PhD, I was actually interested in positive solitude, and I wanted to do an ethnographic work in Japan on positive solitude and Buddhism, but my supervisor convinced me to do research on psychedelics because I own a center for psychedelic integration, not psychedelic assisted psychotherapy because it's illegal at the moment, but psychedelic informed work of psychologists, psychiatrists, etc. So I'm very involved in the field for many, many years, and the intersection of psychedelic and trauma is interesting for me, but it's interesting for everyone. So this is the main thing that people are looking to, of course, MAPS, but also other institutes and organizations. We want to prevent PTSD and give aid, very crucial aid to the acute stages of trauma. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
thanks
of
for
course,
sharing a
if you
bit.
were really, really narrowing down, my interest is in early childhood abuse, sexual abuse, and
Mm-hmm.
psychedelic psychotherapy. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about that because you've had some really interesting publications recently in that area. So I'm excited to get into that. But first, are you happy that your supervisor steered you in this direction? Are you enjoying it?
I really wanted to go to Japan for 2 years and just to do ethnographic work, anthropology work in the woods with some practitioners of Buddhism, but it will wait. Yeah, I'm happy. I
Okay.
love the people in the psychedelic field. I love working in psychedelic research. I like thinking about consciousness, psychedelics, and mental health. This lens is really, it's very diverse. A lot is
Mm-hmm.
possible. I think this is
Mm-hmm.
why we're looking in this field. We can do
Yeah.
much more.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
yeah, it's
agree.
very exciting. Yeah,
Great.
I
Okay,
love what I
so
do.
and in terms of your recent paper in the Journal of Psychopharmacology, you examined survivors of the Nova Festival attack. So that occurred in 2023. But for those who maybe aren't familiar, could you just describe for our listeners what happened at this event and then why
Yeah.
you were inspired to conduct a study on the survivors?
So originally, I'm from a small place called Israel, even though I don't live there for the last year and a half. We left, me and my partner, we decided that we will continue our work, personal life in another country from several reasons. One of them is political. What happened on October 7, 2023 was an attack on on the border of Israel that came from Gaza, and militants from Hamas got into a rave that was happening there on the border. One of them, the biggest one, called Nova Rave, Nova Festival, and people were there, around 40,000 people. Um, it's 378 people got killed that day. 44 were taken hostage. 60% of them were in the influence of some sorts of psychedelics, so LSD or psilocybin even, which is not that common in nature raves, in parties, raves. Majority were on MDMA and other substances like as ketamine or MMC3, MMC4, etc., etc. So this attack, of course, is devastating. But for us, clinicians and researchers, after we gave aid on the very beginning uh, of the event, we understood that we have to conduct research because this scenario cannot be mimicked in any lab. No Helsinki committee will approve this kind of thing, of course, thanks God. So we started looking into that. But before, I will say that on the day of October 7, we gather 8 people that working in harm reduction, psychedelic harm reduction, psychedelic therapy, and psychedelic research. And we established an organization that have, for this moment, 400 therapists. And we reached all the survivors of the event, and we're giving therapy, group therapy, like individual and group therapy, psychiatry services and consultancy to most of the survivors of this rave. And we're doing a psychedelic informed therapy towards them. So a non-judgmental therapy that also acknowledge the phenomenology of psychedelics. And all of us are trauma informed and are trauma specialists. So we really created a new organization that in its core is the understanding of psychedelics and trauma and how do they interact. So I think it's a first of a kind event and a first of a kind organization and treatment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And so the participants were on psychedelics or had taken a psychedelic substance. So what was the finding from the study? What were they experiencing and how did that impact their trauma from this event?
Yeah. So I'm doing qualitative and phenomenological research. I'm coming from quantitative, but I decided to shift and I'm interested in stories, in narratives, and how people think and not only the correlations. So I sat down with 45 survivors of the Nova Rave and I asked them several questions. It was a hour and a half interview, an in-depth interview with them. there's a lot to cover in this, and of course, I'm inviting everyone to read the paper, but we kind of understood that what was happening there is a unique form of dissociation we called adaptive psychedelic dissociation, or APD. And in another study that was just published in the European Journal of Psychotraumatology, we studied the healing path that took place for them after this event. We understood that community played a massive role in their recovery, for example. So we have this new adaptive psychedelic dissociation mechanism that we understood that was there, but also them acknowledging that they were on the influence of psychedelics did a tremendous change in what they experienced. So they all the time move between realizing where they are and feeling like it's a dream or a video game. There is several quotes in our paper that survivors mentioned that they were not sure that this is really happening. It did happen. And this kind of buffered them from the actual horrors of the event. And we know that dissociation act in this way, right? If someone is attacking you, you can dissociate and get away from the situation, but it might still affect you. Usually, as we know, it still affects you. And for them, the integration process is very challenging because it's also psychospiritual, but also very traumatic. They were not feeling present, so it's very hard to build a coherent narrative. And we know that building resilience and a coherent narrative is extremely important when you're recovering from a traumatic event. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the dissociation piece, or adaptive psychedelic dissociation. So in a way, was that protective for them during the experience? And then I guess the second part of that would be when you were doing the integration with them, they would be maybe having like challenges with aftermath processing. So is it even harder for them after the fact, say, compared to someone who maybe wasn't on a psychedelic during the
Yeah.
experience?
I think it will be fair to say that dissociation always acts as a double-edged sword. So you can just, you know, disappear from this scene. Let your body stay there. Sorry for the triggers, but be somewhere else, somewhere better. And I think when people mention this transcendence experience and all is one, and how pretty was the trees and the leaves and how they felt, and this is an interesting finding, that the attacker, right, the militants are also human beings, that gave them an emotional relief. But this relief cannot stay for long because they also need to deal with the fact that they were attacked. Their friends are dead. Yeah. They are carrying PTSD. And it's almost impossible to do a healing process by yourself. I think in some way they are lucky that they experienced this together. And I was giving a talk at the MAPS conference in Colorado in June. And some lady came to me afterwards and said she survived the Texas massacre, right? Not Texas, it was Nevada, Las Vegas, sorry. And she said the fact that they were a group of people that experienced the same thing at the same time gave them a lot of support afterwards. We know that when you are taking care of veterans, you gather them in groups and you let them heal each other, kind of, be the shoulder for each other. So the fact that they are a community, and trans is extremely big in Israel, so they are kind of a tribe. And the fact that they can be there for each other, having new parties together or new ceremonies together that are safer, is something really healing and protective. So as Safeart, the NGO that I just mentioned, we give them the individual therapy, but they're creating their own collective therapy.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. And a heavy topic to be the researcher involved as well. That must be hard at times for you.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. One of the reasons that I don't longer live there is, as I said, the politic that I dislike, the actions that this government is doing, and the fact that I need to be away. Apropos dissociation, I need to be dissociated from this place. And after two papers, we have like several more that are almost ready, but I will leave it be. I need some time off. And
Yeah.
I will go and work with the other traumatic events, but this is enough. Enough with this case, yeah.
That's understandable. So, I also want to talk about your preprint and scientific reports, which was regarding childhood maltreatment. So, why is trauma important in the context of psychedelic therapy for childhood maltreatment? And in your survey, what did you find about those who did or didn't connect their post-psychedelic challenges to trauma?
Yeah. So this work started from the Challenging Psychedelic Experience project led by Jules Evans. And in 2022, Jules reached out to a group of researchers called EPRC, and we're researching emergent phenomena and mysticism and spirituality and psychedelics. And he had this idea from looking at the literature that there is not enough work done on challenging psychedelic experience. And I think for us, people that enjoy psychedelics, consume them for recreational or personal growth, whatever, we all encounter a challenging experience. But back then we had this bad trip word to kind of refer to our challenging psychedelic experience, and not a lot of people felt like this was the thing, right? Bad trips didn't happen for me, for example, but challenging one for sure. And the outcomes are very versatile. So they did the first study, 2023, extended difficulties after psychedelic experiences, and I contributed one question. And this one question was, do you link your challenging psychedelic experience to a trauma you had in your childhood? And 40% said, yes, I do. But we didn't know what it means, right? So they link it, but what? So we gather 48 participants from the survey, and we conducted interviews. And there was a very special group, 18 people that had memories resurfacing during their psychedelic experience. So some people said that the challenging experience was traumatic, and they said it was related. So what was traumatic? That the fact that they met their childhood trauma. Some said it was traumatic at itself because visions or symbolic expressions of trauma were present there. We were very interested in this resurfacing memories during psychedelic experience, and we wanted to know what's going on there, because so many people, especially in ayahuasca ceremonies, by the way, told us they recalled the memory that they were not aware of before. 100% of the time it was sexual abuse in their early childhood. So sorry for the trigger, but vivid picture of somebody entering their bedroom as children, entering their bed, touching them. And they said they knew, again, sorry for the trigger, it was their father. After the ceremony, they had to do something about that, reaching out to their family and asking, excuse my French, what the fuck? Where I was not aware of it. Did you were aware of it? Because I know it happened. And all of the people we talked to said nobody approved that. And all of them said they knew it happened. So they had to also live with this uncertainty, which became also a huge burden and a traumatic of itself. Yeah, so we kind of moved really fast to the. This is the main thing.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is the main thing that stay with us. But I wanted to say regarding challenging psychedelic experiences that people most of the time refer to them as potential experiences for growth. So we do have this tendency to kind of rebuild our experiences for our own good. As I said before, we need a coherent, sometimes positive story to tell ourselves because we don't want to die. We don't want to stop. We want to continue. We want to flourish. We want to achieve our goals and have family and great social life and great jobs, whatever. So everything happened to the best. But when you cannot connect the dots, then trauma is just exploding everywhere.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the term veridicality of recalled memories, so whether
Yeah,
they're literal or if they're symbolic. So, how did you
exactly.
find that participants sort of like dealt with that ambiguity? And do you think that might have been a source of distress, just not really knowing whether it was literal or symbolic?
Yeah. So I will say because we don't know if psychedelics can really trigger memories, but we see that people say they do, we refer to this in kind of an agnostic way, okay? As therapists, as researchers, of course. People that had a symbolic experience of trauma cannot tell who did what to them when. People that had a vivid recall of their trauma, they can leave the session and go to speak with their father if he's alive, to their mother or to their ex or whatever. But the symbolic expression of trauma is something that is very hard to kind of digest. People that experience that got tons of relief through therapy, talking about the experience, metabolize it now that they are after the experience, and actually holding the complexity of was there something there or wasn't not, because the right answer will not come usually. You know, you cannot make sense sometime of your psychedelic experiences, and I think for some people it's a relief that you cannot make sense out of them. You can keep
Mm-hmm.
it symbolic, you can talk about archetypes, because we don't know a lot and sometimes we don't want to know. So the fact that
Mm-hmm.
it's happening in a psychedelic experience, as I said before, when we just start, gives a lot of opportunities, but some people cannot hold the not the opportunities, the opportunity. No, I'm not sure my English, but many things can come out of it, and if you have strong resilience and you can hold complexity, you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to know the answer, sometimes you will not be
Mm-hmm.
able to hold this.
Yeah, it's about the integration, I guess, in that way.
It's about the person, and of course,
Mm-hmm.
the integration is a tool. But yeah, there is people that maybe shouldn't enter a psychedelic experience when they carry this mark around: did something happen to me or not? But this is the controlling paradigm now, right? A lot of people are doing psychedelic experiences, having psychedelic experiences to kind of discover or uncover something that they were not aware of. I was just leading a psychedelic session a week ago, and the main goal of the patient was to find something that he was not aware of. And I'm not intervening in that. I was just there to support and give service to him. And he didn't find anything, and he was upset. And this is something that happens in a lot of psychedelic retreats and a lot of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy sessions. Nothing clear has come up. Maybe just an experience, just yeah, somatic experience sometimes, but
Mm-hmm.
answers, yeah,
Yeah,
staying vague
and
sometimes.
definitely. And drawing from both of your papers, I'd like to start to move towards like what are some lessons we can take away as researchers or clinicians or people undergoing psychedelic therapy. Obviously, we know these substances can facilitate emotional processing of trauma, but like you mentioned, there's also that risk of destabilization if you don't have the proper support or proper container. So, do you think that all psychedelic therapy should be trauma informed? And what elements do you think it should include? And finally, for clinicians, how can they better prepare if there is trauma resurfacing during a psychedelic session?
Not all of us are carrying trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and not all of us need to recover from trauma. Not everything that happened to us is will carry a PTSD symptomology. But nowadays, social media is so much promoting PTSD and trauma as kind of a product in some way, and people are looking for that. People are looking for this. Yeah, I know. So I think if people are entering psychedelic experiences in a search, in a look for a trauma, therapists should be trauma informed and to really understand their experience, the experience of the patients, and try to give them, of course, the support afterwards because they will encounter ambiguity, they will encounter somatic expressions of trauma in some way, and they will need an instant relief, kind of. If you're looking for something, you will be able to find something, I think. If this is the set and setting, so this is what will happen in the end. So yes, I think most of the therapists should have psychedelic informed education, and also trauma informed education, because most of the psychedelic experience happening outside of clinical studies. So we need more therapists that are psychedelic informed. Okay. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if we have both, the psychedelic therapists are informed by trauma and the regular traditional therapists are informed in psychedelics, we'll have safer psychedelic experiences, more clear integration processes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And do you mind just giving an example or two about tools that clinicians can use for trauma resurfacing? So, I think you mentioned at the beginning, like your interest in art therapy. Is that linked to this in any way?
Actually, no.
Oh,
But I will go with the herd and I will say that ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and IFS are brilliant tools for psychedelic integration. I have my own framework, which is mindfulness based psychedelic integration, MBPI, that I developed with a couple of my colleagues, and I teach that. It's kind of similar to the Embark model, if you're familiar with
mm-hmm.
this. So it's a great model for psychedelic integration. But if we're talking about trauma specifically, acceptance and commitment is a very strong tool. If we're talking about experiences that we cannot make really sense out of them, that we cannot go and blame someone and take someone into court. Maybe we don't want to even recall, but we still have this symptomology of the experience. Working with third wave psychology and Buddhist and Dharma perspective can give a lot of comfort if we're reaching psychospiritual or mysticism in our experiences. And also IFS can kind of widen the field that we're working in and to talk with different parts that you experience, because we do experience, as I said, I just came from a session that I guided, and he was himself as a son, he was himself as a grandfather, as a lover, as an employee. So many, so many personalities came, and we need to connect them. We need to help them make a coherent, cohesive story of his experience. So IFS can really support the therapists there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I want to look ahead now. So, what areas of psychedelic research are you excited about or hopeful about? And I would love to know what plans you have for any future studies.
Yeah. So I'm really eager to dive deeper into practices and beliefs of underground therapists. I really want to understand what's going on out there because clinical research, we talked before we recorded this, there is frameworks, there is protocol. I'm familiar with them. We can hypothesize what's going to happen. Usually it happens, but the underground field is just the wild, wild west.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is to his own, no lineage, or there is lineage and it's like this and like that, and there is so much weird stuff going on there, and I like weird stuff. This is why I like psychedelics. And I'm interested in specifically a mental health practitioner that shifted from traditional psychology or psychiatry to psychedelic work. And I want to ask them some really personal questions, but also the pure underground therapists. And I do think that we'll find a lot of influence from social media that using our studies as researchers as kind of a hype mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
For the field, I hope we will reach a plateau. No hype, no super positive outcomes, more studies about the challenging experiences. I think we're promoting something that is good and very much needed. Uh, Like-minded researchers that are looking into challenging psychedelic experiences. Um, the more darkest part of the psychedelic renaissance should be more research. When we'll reach this plateau, I think the organizations, the governments, the FDA, whatever, will feel much more in ease to kind of support us in opening these treatments for people that need that. But I also want to say that I will be very much happy if the medicalization of psychedelics will stop at some moment and will let people enjoy psychedelics, grow and heal themselves in their own territories, the way we did it until now. We don't need to hold the prescription for psychedelics. We need to support people in their natural habitat. So this is why I'm super excited about psychedelic informed therapy for therapists, and I'm really excited about psychedelic integration and studying recreational and naturalistic use. 99% of psychedelic experiences, 0.99999, are happening in naturalistic setting, not in the hospital, and we need to look into that. But there is no money there, so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
nobody is subsidizing us there. Yeah.
Well, I really look forward to seeing your findings after you conduct that research. I think it'll be super interesting. And at my final question now, so just for any listeners who are maybe dealing with trauma or considering psychedelics, what's one piece of advice from your clinical experience on safely navigating altered states of healing?
Do a proper research on the therapists, ask a lot of questions, understand his paradigms, his framework, his beliefs, understand what you're entering. You have your own frameworks, beliefs, and paradigms. He have his own. Okay. Ask: are you trauma informed? What did you study? If something will happen to me during the session, or if I will experience a memory or a vision that I will need to process, will you be able to support me? Right? Contact a therapist before. Make sure that you have a safe ground to go back to and integrate that. Okay? Maybe wait until you have a strong bond with the therapist. I will advise you tell your beloved ones that you're going to go into a psychedelic session. Prepare a very soft cushion for you to land back to on a social level,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes we need a village to hold those experiences. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And just want to say you are not alone. You're not alone out there. And if you feel like that, please start building the circle that will kind of hug you after that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks so much. And Thanks for sharing all of your knowledge with us today. It's obvious that you know a lot about the topic and have a lot of wisdom to share, so I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation with Guy Simon. And thank you to the Center for Psychedelics Health and Research at Queen's University and the support of our sponsors at the Ontario Brain Institute, the Canadian Biomarker Integration Network in Depression, and Providence Care Hospital. Until next time, be well and integrate wisely.